Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of SDPI team, I welcome you to this inaugural plenary of SDPI's 23rd Sustainable Development Conference. This year, our theme is Sustainable Development in the Times of COVID-19. I take this opportunity to thank colleagues and friends who have been actively participating since morning. It is your continued engagement which has made this meeting a success thus far. In today's plenary, I will be virtually joined by Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel sahab, Dr. Abid Suleri, Dr. Sania Nishtar, Mr. Vladimir Norov, and Ms. Uzma Haru. To begin the formal proceedings, and without ado, let me now move to Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel sahab, who has been SDPI's board chair since 2009. He has been a member of the board. He has worked as the Deputy Executive Director of United Nations Environment Program and as Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. He was also elected in 1995 as President of United Nations Environment Program's Governing Council and was also Chief Negotiator for G77 countries in the preparatory meetings of the Second World Summit on Human Settlements. He was elected as a chair of the main negotiators committee at the summit held in Istanbul in 1996. It's over to Ambassador Kakakhel sahab for his welcome remarks, please.
It's a great honor for me on behalf of the Board of Governors of Sustainable Development Institute to welcome you all at the opening plenary of the 23rd Sustainable Development Conference, SD23. Had it not been for COVID-19, we would have held this plenary in person for all of you, like our previous sessions. This, in many respects, is an extraordinary SDC because it is being held in a year which has witnessed the rise and rapid growth of one of the most serious challenges facing humankind. The challenge is not over. The coronavirus continues to rage on, and we do not know what is going to happen. And during the whole of this year, the virus has spread rapidly to nearly all regions of the world, almost 200 countries of the world, big and small, poor and rich, in all continents. The efforts to prevent the spread of this pandemic led to shutdowns and lockdowns, which brought life as we have known it, as it has developed, virtually to an end. All forms of activities were suspended, and industrial production and travel within and across countries, tourism, educational and cultural activities, and normal healthcare facilities have been disrupted and jeopardized. These measures have naturally, inevitably impeded socio-economic development, accelerated unemployment, throwing millions of people out of jobs. These lockdowns have expanded and deepened poverty, disrupted food supply, and threatened food security in many regions. As in the case of other natural and man-made disasters, COVID-19 has disproportionately affected the poor and vulnerable communities. The achievement of the SDGs, based on which constitutes the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, has become nearly impossible. South Asia has suffered hugely from the human and material impacts of COVID-19. Economies of all South Asian countries, including Pakistan, have been plunged in recession, while those economies which were critically dependent on exports and tourism have suffered most. The international community, including the UN and multinational financial institutions, as well as China and a number of developed countries, have responded to the pandemic by assisting developing countries in meeting their urgent healthcare needs and reducing the socio-economic hardships caused by the pandemic. The UN system has helped in promoting international solidarity for limiting to the extent possible the spreading of the pandemic and in rebuilding economies and livelihoods, especially in the developing countries. The United Nations Secretary General convened a special session of the UN General Assembly, which was addressed, among other world leaders, by Prime Minister Imran Khan of Pakistan. Dear friends, a redeeming feature of the situation is the success achieved by a large number of pharmaceutical companies and medical research centers, including one established by Oxford University, in developing vaccines for COVID-19, which are undergoing crucial third phase tests before they can be administered. The World Health Organization has spearheaded efforts such as Khwaja to promote and coordinated efforts to reduce human losses caused by the virus, as well as prevent what is known as vaccine nationalism and vaccine apartheid. You may have seen Amnesty International has already warned the international community that all the vaccines are being monopolized, are being bought over by the rich countries, and the developing countries faces the prospect of having to contend with the material and human losses caused by COVID-19. As far as Pakistan is concerned, the COVID-19 arrived in Pakistan while the country was coping with urgent security and socio-economic priorities. However, it was able to enhance rather speedily the country's absolutely inadequate health facilities, especially intensive care units and ventilators. Our medical community valiantly responded to the challenge of looking after the victims of COVID-19. And in the process, medical personnel have risked their own lives. According to information, more than 10,000 health professionals, doctors, nurses, and support staff contracted the virus. More than 120 have lost their lives. The National Command and Operations Center has done a commendable job of monitoring the evolving patterns of the proliferation of the deadly virus and of guiding and coordinating response measures. The government's performance in providing cash money to nearly 15 million people unemployed and daily wage earners who had lost their essential means of livelihood under the Ehsas program and Benazir's income support program also deserves our appreciation and support. Pakistan, like many other countries, we are all currently going through the second and perhaps more deadly phase of coronavirus, marked by a significant surge of COVID-19 cases in all parts of the country. The federal and provincial governments have been trying to convince people to observe the necessary precautionary measures. These efforts deserve support. Dear friends, discussions during this current SDC will focus on assessing the immediate and long-term impacts of COVID-19, the effectiveness of the responses thereto by the government and other stakeholders to identify lessons for coping with future disasters, such as those caused by climate change. Towards the end, I would like to thank all our partners from within and outside Pakistan, which have extended their invaluable support to SDPI for organizing this conference. I hope all those attending the discussions during SDC 23 will find them useful. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kakakhel, for your remarks. In line with your continued advice, SDPI team has been very busy lately in delivering policy research and outreach on various aspects of COVID-19. And of course, with your continued guidance, our team has provided support to the government in forecasting the losses to food systems, losses to MSMEs, informal and vulnerable segments of the population. We are, of course, much encouraged to see, as you mentioned, the experience at NCOC. We are much encouraged to see that several of our policy recommendations were part of the various government packages which were announced in response to the pandemic. To explain about the conference further, and of course, for his introductory remarks, I would like to invite Dr. Abid Suleri. Dr. Suleri has been heading SDPI since 2007. He's a member of several government and non-governmental forums and bodies, including Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Food Security and Advisory Group at the National Security Division, Pakistan Climate Change Commission, Trade Policy Advisory Committee of Ministry of Commerce, as well as several important intergovernmental bodies abroad. Without ado, I'll request Dr. Abid Suleri, Executive Director, SDPI, for his introductory remarks, please.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending from wherever you have logged in to be part of today's virtual inaugural session. First of all, let me say a very warm welcome to you for being part of this historical Sustainable Development Conference. And I'm saying historical because this is the first time we are having a virtual annual conference. Initially, we were a bit reluctant that this whole business of going virtual that may not be very successful. But as you would see when the agenda gets unfolded, that we have 43 sessions, including 7 plenaries. We have panelists from 26 countries, 236 panelists, including 62 which are from outside Pakistan, abroad. So from 26 countries, they have joined us. And if you look at the list of participants on your right-hand side, there are about 142 participants who have joined virtually, and there are many more who are watching us live on Facebook and on different other social media panels. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Now, the idea of organizing this Sustainable Development Conference and the theme, talking of sustainable development in the times of COVID-19, that remains quite pertinent. And if I can step back a year and remind you of our last conference, where we had this agenda, sustainable development in the age of digital transformation. So at that time, no one among us knew that we will have to digitally transform ourselves, and we would have to do a lot of the things which we were recommending during 22nd SDC, online offices and online businesses, online virtual meetings, telehealth and teleschooling, etc. So all of it would be become reality in a matter of months. So, but it has become now reality, and now we have entered in an era where the discussion whether this COVID-19 is a blessing in disguise, whether it's a curse, and how to balance these blessings and curse, that has become important, and that's where we decided to organize this year's conference, thinking of sustainable development vis-a-vis COVID-19. Now, Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel has very kindly given us that how sustainable development is getting negatively impacted by COVID-19. And if we take SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, as a proxy to sustainable development, you would see that almost all the major goals, they are getting negatively affected by the COVID. You talk of poverty, SDG 1, and you would find many more millions, not only in Pakistan, but almost in the whole region, in each country, many more millions, they are going behind poverty line. You will find jobs getting laid off. If you talk of SDG 2, you will find food insecurity, food inflation, and food supply disruption. They are now part of new normal. If you talk of health, this whole SDG 3, this whole pandemic is about health, and especially in case of Pakistan, the second wave, which has hit us from November, that is proving to be more deadly and more dangerous. If you talk of gender equality, you will education, you will find that in a country where we already had 22 million people, children out of school, around 40 million more, they are now out of classrooms. Half of them have no stable internet connections or access to 3G and 4G or to the smart devices through which they can actually get connected for their education. If you talk of goal number 5, you will see that this year's Universal Days for against gender-based violence, the theme was shadow pandemic. That is in the midst of this pandemic, a shadow pandemic is hitting the women and girl children and girls. So gender inequality is increasing. If we are talking of goal number 6, water and sanitation, when we are talking of wash your hands after every half an hour, or when we are talking of follow the best hygienic practices to avoid COVID-19, we also need to keep in mind that National Nutrition Survey 2018, which was released a few weeks ago, it tells us that almost 1/3 of population has no access to clean drinking water, has no access to sanitation facilities. So this is the context in which we have to look at sustainable development. And if you look at the agenda, which is available online, or the pattern of different sessions, you will find that we are trying to discuss different aspects of the 6 goals that I mentioned. In case of economy, we are talking of how economy is getting affected. We are talking of institutional arrangement and policy responses of economy to COVID. And tomorrow we will have wonderful plenaries, one with the Governor State Bank and Federal Minister for Industry and Production, Mr. Hamad Raza, another plenary with Dr. Ishrat Hussain. They would be talking of the whole economy and how it is getting affected by this pandemic. If we are talking of food insecurity, or food security, or transforming the whole food system into the new normal, we have two panels on food security, one on food security and one would be on food systems. If we are talking of health, we have three panels on health. We would be joined by Dr. Faisal Sultan, advisor to Prime Minister on health. We will be joined by Dr. Nageen Sohai, who is the Parliamentary Secretary for Health, and will be joined by country representative WHO in Pakistan. All of them talking of different aspects of health vis-a-vis pandemic. When we're talking of education, again, you will find at least three panels on education, one on higher education, the requirement of higher education. This morning, we had a panel on education needs in the times of COVID-19, and we will have a panel on education methodology. When we're talking of gender, you will again find panels specifically focusing on gender requirement in the times of COVID-19. In case of water and sanitation, we have two panels on water. One is on urban water governance, second is on access to water. So the point I'm trying to say that we tried to make this SDC a demand-driven SDC, whereby we could discuss in detail different challenges that are COVID-19 has brought on SDGs, on sustainable development, but also to discuss different silver linings and blessing in disguise with this COVID-19. And when I talk of blessing in disguise or silver lining, I'm pointing to the fact that the governments, not only government of Pakistan, but governments all over the world, now they would have to bring their radar back on social sector development, on agenda of social sector development. Now, after this pandemic has hit, and amidst this pandemic, countries, they can no longer afford to deviate from health requirements, from educational requirements, from social protection, from poverty alleviation, from food security. And that to me is a silver lining in a country where we used to, I used to classify government expenditure in 4 Ds, debt servicing, defense and security, day-to-day administration and development, and where development had to be, budget on development had to be compromised every year. So now, like the first 3 Ds, the 4th D would also become an obligation and a mandatory and a no longer discretionary expenditure for the government, because this COVID has actually taught the governments that if they can invest in human capital, if they can invest in human systems and social systems, the countries, they can better survive from this COVID-19. And again, if one looks at the social protection, and we'll be joined by Dr. Sania Nishtar later, and she would be educating us on government's initiatives to protect the COVID hit population, especially the low and low middle income earners. So she would be giving us a detail of them. But if I compare it from 2018, when we had the highest budget for Benazir Income Support Program or social protection, it was 130 billion rupees. Today it's 230 billion rupees, and it's increasing. Most of they are from borrowed money, but then the counter argument is that we have been borrowing money for all sort of needs. Perhaps this is the time when we should not mind borrowing money, as long as that borrowed money is getting spent on spent on social sector development, is getting spent on social protection, is getting spent on beefing up and strengthening our health infrastructure and our sustainable development needs.
An HEC recognized journal which you are leading as editor. And I really wanted that for the information of our esteemed gathering over here, if you could let us know about both these publications and more importantly, how they are continuing to add value for both academia and policy community. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Vaqar. Thank you to all the panelists who have joined us today and the audience. Yes, we are very happy to note that finally our book has come out, the latest SDC anthology titled Sustainable Development in a Digital Society. It's going to be uploaded and available for free. One is welcome to download. Others are most welcome to purchase a copy from the Resource Center at a discount. So it's a year-long process in which soon after the conference ends, it doesn't end there actually. Soon after we start the publication process. A call for final papers is sent out to all our key panelists who wish to submit their papers. We give them a month's long time to finalize their papers, incorporate the comments received during the panel discussion. And then when we receive the papers, we go through a peer review process, which also is time consuming. We thank our valued referees who spend a lot of time in reviewing, and then it goes back to the authors for necessary revisions. So it takes us at least 5 to 6 months to go through that process, the peer review process. And afterwards, we shortlist a publisher for this anthology. As you can see, it's Sange Meal. We've been publishing with Sange Meal for the past many years. And this year also, we have them on board. The book will be available at the bookstores also and at our library as well. Secondly, what I would like to share here is that the authors or the speakers who present at the conference have two choices. Either they can submit their papers for our anthology, or they can submit it for our annual journal, which is also in the process of publishing, and it will be uploaded soon. I'll just show you a copy of our journal. It's an annual journal. We're going to launch the recent one in another few days. It's going to be uploaded. So our authors are welcome to submit for either of the publication.
Thank you, Usma. And maybe if I can request you for a supplementary response as well. I do understand that a lot of development partners partner with us in this endeavor. And if you can elaborate not only this year's partnerships, those development partners who have collaborated with us this year, but also how they receive advice from these conferences and how the proceedings which come out after this conference benefit their work. Please.
Definitely, we're grateful to all our donors who not only fund our conference, but we also have knowledge partners among our donors, FES, the Dutch Embassy, Malala Fund, there's a whole list of about 20 of them. And then we have knowledge partnership with Fatma Jinnah Women's University, Boston University, and the list can go on. So we're happy to have them on board. We're collaborating in many of the sessions, and many of them are being jointly organized with their support, with speakers identified by them, and working in areas similar to those that SDPI is working on.
Thank you, Usma. And maybe on this point, I would also like to bring in Dr. Abid Suleri. And Dr. Suleri, I would like to I would like you to discuss this year's conference agenda a bit more in detail and how the sessions came together. And also, if we can request you to give us your brief take on the evolution of the Sustainable Development Conference. You've been curating these conferences for over a decade and a half, and this year, of course, it goes online, given the circumstances. So if you can take us through this journey and how demands on this platform have changed over time, and what has been the impact of SDC.
Well, thank you, Vaqar. I think it is the largest congregation of people working in and on South Asia on sustainable development, not only in South Asia, but gradually it has expanded. When it was perceived, it used to be a regional conference, South Asia conference, but over last years, it has expanded first to our Western partners in Europe and North America. And now gradually we also have partners from East Asia on board. For example, in this morning session, we had a speaker from ILO based in Japan who has joined us. So this is over the years has become an international, truly international conference. As I said in the beginning, that we have speakers from 25 countries plus one Pakistan, so 26 countries in total. Second, it's not only a talk shop where people they come together, they present their papers, and they go back. The mere fact that the discussion take place, the exchange of ideas, what is working, what's not working, what are the positive strengths and negative strengths, those become very handy. Of course, researchers, when they network with each other, they try to understand the modalities by how to influence their decision makers and key actors and factors in sustainable development. And as Uzma showed, the anthology, which comprises of just the selected papers which were presented last year, this is also, it contributes towards the knowledge body, which again becomes very important. So I can say that over the years, this conference, it has in itself become an institution, and people, they mark their calendar in advance to join it every year. They know that it will take place somewhere in December, and they join it. And this anthology is actually part of curriculum in many of the Asia Study Centers in European and North American universities.
Thank you, Dr. Suleri. And an additional area where I may request your response is with regards to how has the interest in SDC gone beyond the traditional donors. We are now seeing a private sector taking keen interest in the Sustainable Development Conference. We see members of Pakistan Business Council who participate very actively, as well as other business associations as well. We also note how academia has come forward, who traditionally only used to participate in academic conferences and now feel the need to have their work showcased or discussed in policy-relevant forum. Has the SDC provided them the right platform, and how do you see these non-traditional partners joining you for SDC?
Well, thank you, Vaqar. This is again a very important area. Of course, our development partners, initially they used to be the only co-organizers or co-sponsors of different sessions. But as you rightly mentioned, that we have now private sector engaging with us. We have the business groups engaging with us. And they want to showcase their best practices towards sustainability and sustainable development. Last year, we had Nestle Pakistan and Angro. They had their own sessions. So as you know that one of the ways they can contribute towards this conference is by organizing their own session. So we provide them the space and they bring their own speakers, their own, they organize their own sessions under our editorial guidelines. And that's how we can take this agenda, collective agenda forward. I can also see the increased interest of academia in the conference, and partly because of SDPI's consistency and persistency of holding this event, and partly because of the reason that our journal is now HEC recognized journal. So I would request members of academia, if they haven't already contributing papers in that journal, that they should contribute their papers in the journal, because now it's an HEC accredited journal. And I can see the reason that
Sorry, Dr. Suleri, I think we can't hear you. I think, yes, I think you're back online.
Yeah, and I can see the reason we have youngsters and students joining this conference, because as I said in one of the promo that we filmed for promoting this conference, that sustainable development is a multi-dimensional concept, and it is difficult to get a fresher course or get a crash course on these diversified topics. But this conference provides an excellent opportunity. Within 4 days, we do have almost each and every aspect of sustainable development covered. It gets covered in 4 days. We have all the eminent panelists who can share their views with us on those aspects. And we have policy makers here, we have practitioners, we have academia, we have media. So it's a truly multi-stakeholder gathering that would take place not only started today, but over next 3 days.
Yes, thank you. And I do want to ask Uzma in a while what kind of papers have been received more recently, last year, even before that. It's not very easy to receive policy papers, and of course more difficult to find internal and external reviewers for policy papers. But maybe before that, I can ask one additional question to you, Dr. Suleri, that post-pandemic, we did see that there was a lot of interest in development partners requesting for rapid research around areas of food security, support to MSMEs, support to exporting enterprises, vulnerable segments of the population. And of course, you also had a session on this around social protection as well. So how has that request for rapid research, which came towards you and your team at the start of the pandemic, how has that impacted this year's agenda? Or to put differently, how the agenda would be contributing towards the dissemination of the rapid findings?
Well, Vaqar, this new normal is all about rapid responses. It is a response to vaccine development, which under normal circumstances used to take 4 to 5 years, or it is about research and assessment. And of course, SDPI being one of the premier multidisciplinary think tanks in Pakistan, we received a lot of requests for our rapid assessment of the situation, the COVID situation, how it is impacting the three particular dimensions. One, the health pandemic itself. Second, social protection and informal sector, small and medium enterprises, so protection of livelihoods. And third is about the food security, whether it is disrupting any of the food supply chains, whether it is affecting food inflation, whether it would affect the food supplies for next years. And I'm glad to report that SDPI, by virtue of having a transdisciplinary team, we were ready to contribute towards these topics. We were able to quickly adapt to new methodologies of doing research. Many of the focus group interviews and focus group discussion, those we immediately switched to the online platforms like Zoom and Skype and WhatsApp. With our niche among decision makers and among stakeholders, we were able to get their quick feedback, what are their requirements, whether they are happy with the responses of policy responses of the governments, what additional policies they would like the government to take in response to COVID-19, etc. We immediately became a bridge between the beneficiaries or effectors of the policy responses and the policy response providers. And I think that sort of brokering role that has helped us not only to maintain our niche, but also it helped in maintaining our research quality. And I would say that this year's SDC, this in fact is sort of validatory, this sessions to validate what we have been researching and what we have been recommending during last 8 to 9 months of this COVID pandemic. So we will get challenged by our participants, by our speakers. We will get endorsed where we were right, and we would get corrected where we were not assuming our hypotheses were on wrong foundation. And I think overall that would help us in shaping our research and advocacy and policy outreach agenda for year 2021.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Suleri. And Usma, back to you with the question around attracting good policy papers. And as I said, we do recall how difficult it was for you during the initial days of the journal. And of course, not only to receive contribution, but also to get good peer review process around that. So if you can sort of highlight how you sort of overcame those challenges and where we stand today, and probably also if you can highlight the key areas where or key themes on which you are now receiving these policy papers.
Thank you, Vaqar. So in the forthcoming journal, we have a variety of themes, starting with intercultural dialogue for sustainable development. There's a chapter on disaster risk governance. There's another one on cyber warfare trends. Then there's another one on news content, youth development in Pakistan, and there's also an international paper from Romania on Romania's national plan against illegal logging. So we carry a variety of themes under the sustainable development. Of course, the overarching umbrella is sustainable development. Similarly, in our anthology this year that has just been launched, we have a chapter consisting of President Dr. Arif Alvi's chapter on Fourth Industrial Revolution. And then we're pleased to see that Dr. Sania's chapter is also included, from the MDGs to SDGs, Pakistan Digital Governance Future. So these are some of the key areas that we've already included. And in the future, we're looking for similar themes. Of course, a lot will have to do with COVID-19 and the way forward and the opportunities that we can tap. Thank you.
Thank you, Usma. And two of our colleagues, I think, who have worked very tirelessly in hosting this panel, of course, Mr. Shahid Minhas and Mr. Hassan Murtaza, require a lot of acknowledgement over here. And maybe I was hoping if I can request Mr. Shahid Minhas as well, who has a session later this evening, which brings together more than a dozen vice chancellors on board, and including an effort to have a consortium around more policy relevant research amid these pandemic times. So Shahid, if you can elaborate on this effort and maybe also invite some of the colleagues over here to join you later this evening as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaqar, for giving me this opportunity to talk about something relevant to education and higher education. So, of course, this is an August forum, and I'm really thankful to the senior management of SDPI for managing this 23rd International Conference, Sustainable Development Conference, very successfully through digital connectivity. And as far as the education is concerned, no doubt this COVID has made a very huge dent to the academia and the education sector, from the primary education to the higher and secondary education as well. So we are trying to bridge this gap of policy research with the academia think tank collaboration, and we have established that forum for the connectivity between actual research, action research, and the academic research. And for that, we have established, SDPI has established in collaboration with the other universities and Allama Iqbal Open University particularly, the CASPER, means the Council for the Advancement of Sustainable Policy on Education and Research. And the idea is to connect the think tanks within Pakistan and around the world to the national universities of Pakistan, so that they may be able to highlight the sort of academic research and the gaps where they need support from the think tanks, and where think tanks can get maximum connectivity with the students, with the youth of Pakistan, which is 44% right now, and which is being increased. And this is the right time to bridge that gap between academia and industry, the academia and the think tank. And I'm really thankful to all the vice chancellors, to all the universities, those who are putting efforts in collaboration with SDPI to build back better this challenge of higher education in terms of sustainability, in terms of quality of education, and in terms of quality of examination and assessment. So we are trying to organize a couple of sessions on education, and the very next session after this plenary would be on challenges to higher education during this pandemic. And we are looking forward to engage all the larger audience from the university, from other think tanks, from the civil society organization. Please do join us for that education panel. Thank you so much, Dr. Vaqar.
Thank you, Shahid. And further details, of course, can be seen on our SDC webpage as well. And of course, thank you for also introducing Casper. I invite colleagues to get in touch with you, those who require more information on this initiative. Now, I want to go back to Dr. Suleri, and I wanted to ask him how government has been taking the advice lately. I do understand that a lot of things, a lot of evidence is requested by the government, but then a lot of evidence is sourced from the civil society. And of course, while some is demand-led, the other is supply-led evidence. But given that SDPI has been presenting this evidence to two important forums, which is NCOC, as well as the National Security Council, and if I may say, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council as well. So my question would be, how receptive has the government been, or how can their reception be improved further? We do understand that they're working in a firefighting mode amid the pandemic, but how can the think tank community help further?
Well, thank you, Vaqar. I think for any think tank to be effective, the foremost requirement is its knowledge base, its credibility, its research, and second is its access to the right corners, so that it can transfer that research findings and recommendations. It can be a catalyst in getting those recommendations transferred into policies. So I would say that SDPI, being an independent non-governmental policy research think tank, over the years we have remained our non-partisan entity in tech. We are approached by every government for our policy recommendations. Unlike many other think tanks whose sole objective whose yardstick for success is achieving access to the policymakers, our challenge is that we have abundance of access and we don't want to compromise on our quality. So at times we have to say no to many of the demands that we get for policy recommendations or research if we feel that we haven't have enough evidences or we haven't have enough work to present. So we have to apologize from the government circles. And I would say that over last 15 years, at least in the last 3 democratically elected governments, the acceptance of evidence and acceptance of independent think tanks, that has increased. So if I look at the journey of think tanking and the journey of providing policy recommendation, so I'm sure in case of SDPI, yes, but generally as well in case of many other areas, the acceptance of think tanks in policy making, the role of think tanks in policy making, either their visible role or behind curtain, that is increasing, and I think that is a positive sign. So at least the government is giving some weightage to evidences. The point in time, the case in point that I wanted to display here while Dr. Sania joins us. The Minister is extremely concerned about food hoarding and food inflation, and he is also mindful of the fact that one of the reasons different governments, they are not able to control hoarding or inflation is that the decisions to control inflation is not based on right set of evidences and right set of data. So SDPI was asked to support government and devise a food security dashboard. And if I share my screen here, you will find this is the type of dashboard that we have prepared. It's a prototype still in the dummy form, but data is being populated in it. And the whole theme of it is that it would give the decision makers in one glance, they can see the districts where a certain commodity is abundant, then the consumption. Those districts are colored green here. For example, I clicked on this district based on the dummy data. It tells me that in Kila Saifullah, the stock position is surplus than the daily demand. It tells me the price, and it also tells me the price hike during last 15 or 20 days. I can choose the commodities from this dialog box: sugar, flour, rice, various types of rice, and gram, various types of pulses, wheat, etc. The idea is to get this data populated at district level and get a real-time data. So the deputy commissioners and district food controllers and cane commissioners, which control sugar, and other relevant authorities, they would be submitting their data at one central office in the district, most probably the deputy commissioner's office, who would be updating this data on a daily basis. So here we can select any particular district, we can select any particular province. For example, if I just want to focus on Punjab province, so rest of the map, as you can see, is turning white. So I'm only focusing on Punjab right now. If I want to focus on Sindh, you would see that again, it would show me the trends for Sindh. Here I also have algos and I have analytical skills. So on your right hand of the screen, you can see some of the trends which are presented here. The price trend, the stock trends, consumption trends, and it also gives me data in that I can export to Excel sheets. The color coding, it would start blinking. So where the food is less than, the stocks are less than the consumption level, those districts, they would start getting red. Where they are about to deplete, those districts would go orange or yellow, and green means that these districts, they have surplus stock. So decision makers, while they are looking at this dashboard on a daily basis with the live data, they would be able to actually see the movement of stocks. They would also be able to see that if any particular district is getting red, whether any other district is getting green or it's getting orange or yellow. So I think this is again one step forward in policy making and decision making, where with the evidence base, we are trying to improve government's decision making power with the real time data, so that, and also with algos, so that they can see the trends and they can take well informed decisions. We are thankful to FCDO and IDRC for providing technical support and backstopping us in order to develop this huge database and food security dashboard. And this dashboard would be very soon formally inaugurated by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and all the provinces, those would be asked to start populating data here. So this is one of the success stories. If you would like me to explain that how we assess our success and our strength. So some of the recommendations, when they get implemented, they get heard of, they get implemented, and we are asked to provide solutions. I think that is the role of think tanks, and our work would not stop here. We will also have to handhold different provinces in order to help them to populate data in this dashboard, and we will also have to do the bug fixing and other maintenance in this food security dashboard until one of the government ministry, it finally adopts it and owns it.
Thank you, Dr. Suleri, for this presentation. And in fact, your last point, which you mentioned, was going to be my next question, that what is the role of provincial governments over here? Because when it comes to demand and use of evidence, even if we take the same example of food security, a large part of the responsibility also falls with the provincial governments. And you, of course, on request of the government, were able to travel to most of the provinces, taking account of their food security needs, as well as looking into the reasons and solutions for supply chain disruptions. So I would really like you to explain to us briefly the role of the provincial governments here, not just to the extent of filling up the details in this dashboard, but also to make it meaningful into an MIS which can lend analytical power, which can lend power to their day-to-day decision making.
Well, Vaqar, after 18th Amendment, agriculture, this irrigation, livestock, forestry, etc., they are now provincial subjects. Food is a provincial subject. Food security is in federal domain, and federal government can only provide the policy framework. But then, having said it, federal government can't get absolved from its responsibility of ensuring food security for all. That is one of the constitutional provision that the state is responsible for food security of those who cannot have their own food. And when we are talking of state, it means federation as well as the confederating units. Of course, there can be two approaches. One approach whereby one sitting in Islamabad can keep on accusing and blaming the confederating units for not doing enough. And second is taking a proactive approach and hand-holding the provincial governments, building their capacity, providing them with the tools which are required, and guiding them in the policy matters through evidence-based policy recommendations, so that they can gain their organic pace to synchronize their policies and practices with the federal government's food security framework. And I think when we're talking of food security dashboard, which would be populated at district level under the ownership of provincial government, so we are trying to actually do part of our job, and that is that we are trying to have this horizontal and vertical linkages developed in multidisciplinary subjects like food security. One is also expecting the similar dashboard for climate change and for different environmental indicators. And as in one of the morning panels, Dr. Fahmida Mirza, she was highlighting the role of her ministry interprovincial coordination for these type of subjects and matters. I think it would be extremely useful and important if one takes sustainable development as a collective responsibility of federal government, of provincial government, of private sector, of non-governmental actors, think tanks, academia, media. So all of us, we are collectively responsible, and the type of interventions like food security dashboard is one of such examples that how we can dispose of and how we can deliver on such collective responsibility.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Suleri. And maybe you would also like to highlight how our regulators would stand to gain as well. We do understand that COVID may have forced this urgency to have this digital transformation within the food security systems in place. Of course, the technology or the brain power to have such digital portals was still around long ago, but it was probably only due to COVID-19 that there was a lot of demand to have this portal up and running and really quickly. And we also understand that the demand for this portal coincided with the wheat and sugar price volatility, as well as the price volatility in several other food items of essential use, which necessitated and which sort of motivated the government to think towards more digital tools in monitoring the supply, demand, and the prices. So what I'm understanding from your presentation is that it's not just the food departments who get to benefit from this tool, it's also the regulators whose responsibility it is to ensure free and fair competition in our markets.
Vaqar, of course, this digitalization that would not only help the nodal departments, but also the regulators. In our country, availability of credible data and using that data for analysis and for decision making, that was, I think, surely required for sustainable development, for any sort of developmental intervention. We are mindful of the fact that in the beginning, perhaps the data that would be populated to the tools like food security dashboard that may be not up to the mark, but it is just like the attempts to document economy. Once the relevant departments, they would start populating the data, I think a month down the road, 3 months down the road, if something goes wrong, they would have to, then they will not be able to maneuver or change the data, and they would have to either give some explanation for providing wrong data, or they would have to take the mid-course correction. And this is something that would help our regulators as well as our provincial governments and the people of Pakistan who at times by virtue of a lack of such information with the government. For example, there is no mechanism on how the sugar retail price is fixed. There is no demand on cost and benefit analysis of sugar and how the sugar ex factory price is fixed. So once we have this type of data coming in the portals like I showed you, then of course it would be a win-win-win situation. A win for government, a big win for regulators, and a big win for people who have been getting exploited by food holders due to lack of credible evidences and lack of credible data.
Thank you, Dr. Suleri. And maybe also because you mentioned the contributions of FCTO and IDRC for making this research possible, I would also like to mention over here some of the partners who have really come forward and collaborated for this year's 23rd STC. These include Climate Action Network South Asia, Creative Learning, Embassy of the People's Republic of China, Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands in Pakistan, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, you mentioned IDRC, International Center for Migration and Policy Development, ILO, International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease, Malala Fund, Nestle Pakistan, World Bank, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, WaterAid. And apart from that, I think we must also thank some of the knowledge partners who are here with us today, including the Boston University, Pardee Center, Allama Iqbal Open University, Consumer Unity and Trust Society International, Fatma Jinnah Women University, National Rural Support Program, and Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. Maybe I could also request Dr. Suleri, as he was in touch with the President office as well as Dr. Sania Nishtar's engagement. I do understand that they now plan to join us in the upcoming sessions. If Dr. Suleri, you can update us.
Yes, thank you, Vaqar, and thank you, dear delegates, for being with us for last 1.5 hour. We plan to conclude this plenary at 4:30. I have a bad news and a good news. The bad news is that Excellency President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi and Dr. Sania Nishtar, they would not be able to join in this panel. As you know, that initially this whole opening plenary was designed in person, our physical presence at presidency, but due to the last minute surge in COVID cases, it had to be virtual. They would not be able to join for this panel, but the good news is that both of them, they would be joining us either tomorrow or day after. So the presidency staff, they are adjusting president's schedule for tomorrow. So either we would have the virtual presence of Honorable President with us tomorrow or day after, and Dr. Sania Nishtar would be joining in one of the other plenaries. So my apologies that both of these distinguished speakers, they couldn't join. My fondest gratitude to Honorable Mr. Norov, the Secretary General of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for joining us in this opening plenary. And my thanks to Vaqar for very skillfully moderating this panel. I didn't realize that 90 minutes are already over and we can formally conclude. Over to you, Vaqar.
Thank you, Dr. Suleri. And just by way of thanking Excellency Norov, Ambassador Kakakhel, yourself, Dr. Suleri, Ms. Usma Haroon, and Mr. Shahid, Minhas, and Mr. Hassan Murtaza for organizing this. I do thank all our esteemed colleagues for joining here, and I do understand that in a couple of minutes they will be joining their concurrent sessions as well. I invite all of you to look into the agenda with regards to the sessions later today, as well as tomorrow and thereafter. You're requested to register. You're also requested to follow us on the social media. We have a very active social media team today and for the next 4 days. Please feel free to engage with them. And with this,
Vaqar, if you can also update the participants about forthcoming session. One of the plenaries, plenary, where Dr. Adil Najam has got the panelists from all over planet, that is not to be missed. And as Dr. Adil Najam is not a politician, so I can assure you that he would definitely be here and he would be conducting his plenary. So if before logging off and before thanking the delegates, if you can apprise us of the upcoming sessions today.
Certainly. So, so as Dr. Slay said, I'll just describe this plenary, which is being led by Dr. Adil Najam, which is discussing the world after Corona. And of course, Dr. Adil Najam would be the host. He will have with him Yolanda, who's from WWF and former Minister of Environment in Ecuador, Ms. Alice Ruiza, African Regional Director for WWF. We'll have Professor Sakiko from the New School and former Director, UNDP Human Development Report Office. And also he'll be joined by Dr. Sunita Narayan, who is DG CSC India and editor of Down to Earth magazine. This plenary is planned for 8 p.m. in the evening today, in the interest of the time zones of our colleagues who will be joining us. But before that, at 5:30 p.m., we will have 3 concurrent sessions. The first one would be impact of COVID-19 pandemic on higher education, challenges and way forward. The second would be negotiating the climate amid COVID-19. And third would be air quality and health issues amid COVID-19. This starts at 5:30 p.m. And as Dr. Suleri said, we look forward to welcoming you to all these sessions. With this, and in case there are no other pressing interventions from my fellow panelists here, we formally end the inaugural session for the 23rd Sustainable Development Conference. Thank you for joining us.